Have you ever really thought about what powers a growing nation? I mean, yeah, there are the big power plants and the grid, but what about the stuff you don't see? The millions and millions of kilometers of wires and cables that connect literally everything. Well, today, we're going to dive into the story of a company that is, no joke, wiring India's growth. And that company is Polycab.
Their tagline is pretty powerful. Connection, Zindagi Ka. It basically means connection for life. And you know, that's more than just a catchy phrase for electrical wires, right? It's about connecting homes, businesses, an entire nation to its future. So the big question is, how do you build an entire kingdom on such a simple, powerful idea? Well, let's get into it.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. First up, we'll get to know Polycab and just how big they become. Then, we'll step into their cable kingdom to see how they totally dominate their main business. After that, we're going to look at their brilliant move beyond just wires. We'll also uncover the secret sauce, the strengths that protect them. And finally, we'll plug into what's next for them.
All right, first up, let's meet Polycab India. And I gotta say, this is not just some cable company. No, what we're looking at here is a diversified electrical powerhouse that has had a truly meteoric rise.
So the first thing to really get about Polycab is that they are way more than just cables. I mean, sure, that's still the bulk of their business, about 65%. But look at this. They built out two other really strong pillars. You've got fast-moving electrical goods, think fans, lights, that kind of stuff. That's FMEG at 18%. And then you'll have these huge, large-scale projects, what they call EPC, at 17%. This whole three-part strategy, that's the absolute key to their strength and their growth.
And if you want to see just how massive their growth has been, wow, just look at these numbers. Back when they had their IPO in 2019, their market cap was around 8,500 crore rupees. Fast forward to today, it's over 1.1 lakh crore. That's more than a 12 times increase in just a handful of years. We're not talking about just a large company anymore. This is a true industry titan.
So, how in the world did they build this empire? Well, it all starts at the core, their main business. Welcome to what I like to call the cable kingdom. Let's dig into how Polycab became the absolute undisputed leader in a super competitive market.
Okay, so you have to understand, India's market for wires and cables is massive, but it's also really fragmented. So being the leader, that really means something. And Polycab's leadership, it's undeniable. They command almost 19% of the entire organized part of the market. Now think about that. Having nearly a fifth of the whole pie doesn't just make you a leader, it makes you the king.
And this success is no accident. Believe me, they played this masterfully. They went from being just a B2B supplier, selling to other businesses, to a brand that people trust in their own homes. And their strategy is all about diversification. They serve a ton of different industries, which means that no single customer is more than 5% of their revenue. Why is that so important? Well, it's a brilliant shock absorber. If one sector has a bad year, it doesn't sink the ship.
But okay, the story doesn't stop with cables. Not even close. Polycab made a huge strategic bet by going beyond the wires. So let's talk about how they built their second massive growth engine, their FMEG business.
And this is such a classic business story of risk and reward. So back in 2014, when they jumped into the consumer market with stuff like fans and lights, it was tough. I mean, they were losing money at first while they were building it up, but they were patient, and it paid off big time. In just 3 years, they hit break-even. 1 year after that, boom, they were profitable. And now, this division is just a consistent moneymaker. It is a textbook case of brilliant long-term thinking.
And you can see the impact of that strategy crystal clear on this chart. Back in 2019, FMEG was a pretty small piece of the puzzle, just 8% of their business. But by 2026, it's expected to be 18%. Think about that. They've more than doubled its importance. They've successfully built a whole new engine for growth, which makes the company way less reliant on just the cable business.
Okay, so what holds this whole thing together? What protects their kingdom from competitors? Let's dig into their unseen strengths. This is the competitive moat, the deep advantages that make them so tough to beat. First up is just pure scale. We're talking about having your products in over 140,000 retail stores across India. And get this, that number was 100,000 just back in 2019. So it's not just big, it's growing fast. A massive network like that is so hard for any competitor to copy. It's like their army on the ground, everywhere.
Their other secret weapon? It's something called backward integration.
Now that sounds super technical, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Instead of just buying all your ingredients from someone else, you start making them yourself. You own the supply chain. So by partnering up to source their own copper and making components in-house, they get total control. And what's the result? Well, you get lower costs, you get better quality, and you get a supply chain that is rock solid, something their competitors can only dream about.
All right, so that brings us to our final piece of the puzzle, the future connection. I mean, with a foundation this strong, you have to ask, where does a powerhouse like Polycab go from here?
Well, their roadmap actually has a name. It's called Project Spring. And listen, this isn't some fluffy mission statement. Nope, this is a hardcore, concrete strategic plan that lays out exactly how they plan to grow all the way to 2030. It's got clear targets for everything from investment to market leadership.
And their goals? Oh, they are ambitious. They're not just aiming to grow with the market. They want to grow 1.5 to 2 times faster. They're targeting better profits from their FMEG business. They want to make exports a much bigger piece of the pie, over 10% of revenue. And they're planning to keep pouring billions into capital expenditure every single year. And on top of all that, they want to give more back to shareholders. It is a bold, all-out strategy for sure. Of course, the road ahead isn't perfectly smooth. There are 2 sides to this coin. On the one hand, you've got these massive tailwinds pushing them forward. Huge government spending on infrastructure, a housing boom, the massive push for renewable energy. All of this creates incredible demand. But on the other hand, you've got the headwinds. Things like volatile prices for copper and aluminum, the ups and downs of the economy, and just fierce competition. It's that classic tug-of-war between huge opportunity and very real risk. So, this all leaves us with one big question. Polycab has done a masterful job of wiring its own growth story right alongside the nation's. But as things change, as competition heats up and markets get volatile, the real test is this. Will its future connection be just as strong? I'm talking about its connection to customers, to the market, and to continued growth. The wiring is all there, but as they say, the circuit is live.